Good afternoon. This is the March 30th, 2021 meeting of the Landmark Preservation Commission. We'll call this meeting to order. And we will start with introductions of the commissioners. I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Kelly Wemple. I'm an architect and I'm nominated by the American Institute of Architects. So next we have Brad.
Hi, I'm Brad Gassman. I'm an architect nominated by History Colorado.
Great. Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Hummel. I'm a landscape architect nominated by the American Society of Landscape Architects.
Graham.
I'm Graham Johnson, Historic Preservation Project Manager, nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Thanks. Julie.
I am Julie Johnson. I am a Historic Preservation Project Manager nominated from the community at large.
Gary.
I'm Gary Petrie. I'm an architect and I was nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
All right. And we don't have Erica today, right? Anne.
I'm Ann Wattenberg. I'm an architect nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
Thanks. And Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Jen Capetto. I'm Landmark Preservation staff.
Great. Thank you. All right. So this was a special meeting that we called, as I'm pretty sure everyone on this call knows. So we don't have any meeting records on our agenda today. Jen, are we holding a general public comment period, or since this is, we are? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Then we'll go ahead and move into our public comment period. This is a time we reserve at the beginning of every meeting to be used not for any project that we are going to be hearing on today's agenda, but for preservation matters in general. So if there's anyone who would like to provide a public comment on preservation matters in general, you have up to 2 minutes each. If you're joining us by phone, please email landmark@denvergov.org. And please provide us with your name, phone number, and what project you'd like to speak on. If you're joining us via computer, you can use the hand raise function in Zoom. And then we also have someone present at the web building. Is there anyone in person today?
Becca is at the web building. She's going to let us know if anyone comes. For the moment, doesn't sound like there
No
is.
one's here right now.
Okay, thanks, Becca.
No hand raises, and there's no one on the phone, just so you know.
Great. All right, then it sounds like we don't have any general public comments. So we'll go ahead and move into our design review projects. So on the screen is the process for design review. I'll go ahead and announce the item on the agenda, and then the staff will start with the presentation of the project. Then we'll have the applicant presentation after that. The applicant has up to 10 minutes to present, and that's the only time period that the applicant can present. So make sure to get everything out then. Then we'll follow that up with a public comment period, and then the commissioners will move into deliberation and vote on the project. So let's try and be very respectful of everyone's time today, because everyone on this call is here because we ran over time in our last meeting. So we want to be very cognizant of that. So our first project today is 2021-COA-086, and it's at 2818 Welton Street.
So our first project is within the 5 Points Historic Cultural District. The applicant is proposing a new 4-story mixed-use building with a detached garage. The primary structure footprint will be 25 feet wide by 72 feet, 8 inches in depth, and a total height of 55 feet. And the garage structure will have a footprint of 15 feet by 23 feet and 9 inches, and a total height of 16 feet. The project will entail the demolition of the existing non-contributing 1-story residence on the site. The 5 Points Historic Cultural District was designated for its historical and geographical significance, and the cultural district is made up of about 98 parcels and approximately 80 buildings. 9 of which are considered contributing to the 5 Points Historic Cultural District. So this is a non-contributing building. We will need a demolition application for this structure. However, this project initially started as a concept in which 2818 Welton Street and the adjacent property to the north would be demolished, and a 50-foot wide infill building would be developed on the site. However, it's been scaled back to a 25-foot wide building, and only 2818 will be demolished. So staff mistakenly did not ask for revisions to the demolition application. However, as this building is not contributing, we're not concerned with the demolition of the structure, as only 9 buildings are identified as contributing. It's undergoing a site development plan review. The project will be located to a new 5-story infill development at 2810, 2812 Welton Street that was recently reviewed by the Landmark Preservation Commission. The proposal will have a commercial ground floor with windows above. The detached garage will be separate from the primary structure by 22 feet, 1 inch. So here we have the ground floor plan. The proposal will have a central recessed entry and then a secondary entry to access the stairs to the upper story. And then you can see that proposed garage structure in the rear, which will be used for the private residence. And then there is a patio space in the back as well. This is the 2nd and 3rd floor. Again, the 2nd floor will be mixed use, and then the 3rd and 4th floor will be private residential use. So here's the 4th floor plan. The project proposal will have a rooftop deck that is accessed by a clear story stairwell, which you can see in the roof plan here. The rooftop deck is oriented toward
Brittany, I think you may have a poor connection.
Welton Street as required by the design guidelines for 5 Points.
Okay, I think we can hear and see you again, but Brittany, your connection's been a little slow, just so you know.
Okay, I don't really know what to do about it. Is this better?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. What was the last thing that was heard?
Well, I kind of heard it cut out a little bit after you mentioned the rooftop decks. Is that what everybody else heard? So if you could pick up from there.
Okay, so it will have a rooftop deck that is oriented towards Welton Street, which is a requirement of the 5 Points design standards and guidelines. Because there are only 9 contributing buildings within the 5 Points Historic District, when applicants are doing infill within the district, we request that the applicants look at the 3 closest contributing buildings within the district. So the 3 closest contributing buildings to this site are Rice's Tap Room and Oven, which is a 2-story building that underwent a rehabilitation recently in the last couple of years. Douglas Undertaking Building, and the Atlas Drug Building. These are all commercial buildings. The Douglas Undertaking Building has a central recessed entry similar to the proposed infill. And then the 2-story buildings do have punched openings similar to the proposed infill. Ooh. Sorry about that. So here's how the proposed infill compares to the 2-story buildings within the surrounding historic context. Within the 5 Points Historic District, you are allowed to build taller than the historic buildings. The tallest building in the district is the Rossonian building. However, whenever you're building above 3 stories, the upper floors must be set back. So this project proposal is proposing to set back the 4th floor 10 feet from the Welton Street facade. So here you can see the 25-foot module that the district is based off of, and this infill development will reinforce with its proposal. Here is a section of the building, again, that ground floor mixed use on the first and second floor, and then private residential residence above. You can see that setback of 10 feet for the fourth floor. And then you can also see the floor to floor heights, which are typical of the 5 Points Historic District, where the ground floor is taller than the floors above. This will have a modern kind of punch window design to it, but the ground floor is very traditional in character with central entrance, a side entrance for the upper floors, and then operable storefront glazing for that restaurant use that is intended to be in the ground floor. The window patterning and proportion is very regular and relates between the building base and the upper stories as required by the 5 Points design standards and guidelines. And here you can see that clear story access for the rooftop deck. This is the rear building elevation. We are recommending conditional approval of this project with the condition that a full elevation of the rear be provided, as we don't currently have that. However, it does appear to be that it will have articulation all around this building, which is also required by the 5 Points design standards and guidelines. It's a little more modern in design on the rear elevation, and it will have integrated balconies on the rear, and then a more modern kind of window proportions. Here you can see the 1-story garage. It will have a skylight structure on it as well. This is just the side elevation. The guidelines for 5 Points do require all facades of the building be articulated. It currently looks like the applicant is proposing to articulate that facade with design detail materials and not so much window openings. This elevation will be adjacent to the new 5-story development that the commission just recently approved revisions on. So hopefully that development will be going in at the same time as this development. And then you can see the rear yard here, which is proposed to have a kind of covered patio space. This is the north elevation. Again, just articulation through those design details. And then you can see the rear structure there. This is just an isometric of the proposal. Again, modern interpretation of the surrounding historic context, but staff feel that this infill development is achieving the mixed use goals of the district and is complying with the design guidelines for the 5 Point Historic Cultural District. So we are recommending conditional approval of the phase 2 infill, just with the condition that a rear elevation of the primary building be provided and a interior elevation of the garage structure be provided, as those are missing from the application at the moment.
Great, thank you, Brittany. Do commissioners have any questions for staff? Yeah, Anne.
Hi, this is Anne. Brittany, I have a question. Is there a definition of what a punched opening is?
Not to my knowledge anywhere. Usually we require windows to be inset 2 inches into the wall plane, and that's something we usually look at the design detail submittal.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, this is Brad. Brittany, I have one question on A4. It's section through the building, and you see the property line tight to the pochade portion of the facade, and then there are these window bucks that seem to project beyond that. And I think I understand what that is, and I can talk to the architect about that. But is that something that would require approval if that projects beyond the property line on the second and third floors?
I'm actually not sure myself. It may require a tier 2 encroachment possibly, but I don't know myself. That would be a better question for the applicant, who's also going through the SDP process currently. So I'm sure they've received that comment if that is something that requires that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right, can we please promote the applicant so that they can present? And looks like you may have already promoted them. So
They're both
that's
promoted.
great. So then I'll just let you know that you have up to 10 minutes. Please start with your name and address for the record. And remember that after your 10 minutes, we'll receive public comments, but we won't have a time to speak with you again. We'll move when we move into deliberation. So, all right, go ahead and unmute yourself and get started whenever you're ready.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, terrific. Hello, and thanks for the opportunity to present. My name is Rich Sidoroff. I'm a registered architect with SBSA in Golden, and we're at 5926 McIntyre Street in Golden. And today we're going to talk about, I'm going to kind of touch on a few points that Brittany mentioned. As she explained, our project is a mixed-use urban infill. It has about 7,000 gross square feet on the 4 main levels. The first level is proposed to be a restaurant with an exterior rear outdoor patio and a detached garage. Second floor, as Brittany mentioned, is office and/or retail, so part of the mixed use. And the third and fourth floor will be the private residence of the owner of and developer of the property. And also, as Brittany mentioned, the 3 closest contributing buildings are Rice's Tap Room, Douglas Undertaking, and Atlas Drugs. And in looking at those buildings in particular, or even more particularly in relation to Rice's Tap Room, which is essentially across the street, I'd like to briefly touch upon how our project is compatible with the 5 Points Historic Cultural District and the surrounding context. So I can just go through a few bullet points. We have a 25-foot wide building module, which is compatible and consistent with the district. We have large storefront bays in a regular module. Our building depth is close to the standard 75-foot depth of the neighboring sites. Our building mass steps back at the 3rd story. Our building heights align with the contributing buildings, in particular Rice's Tap Room. We have large storefront openings, which will have about 60 to 80% transparency at the ground floor facade. Our windows above that, and the bunch windows, are paired and regularly spaced. We have a projecting awning at the shop front and shop entry. We have an 18-inch bulkhead that the storefront will be supported on, which is consistent with the contributing buildings. And we will be using a standard modular brick like the adjacent buildings, contributing buildings. And also, as Brittany mentioned, in accordance with the Historic Cultural District, we have designed the infill building with a modern interpretation of the typical character-defining features of the contributing buildings. Finally, our clients are Denver residents, and they've owned the property at 2820 and run a business on Welton Street for the past 10 years. And they are very much looking forward to this new venture that will allow them to live and work on Welton Street. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. And thank you for attending the last meeting. Sorry we didn't get to your project, so we really appreciate your patience. Commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant? And Brad, maybe if you want to start with yours.
Yeah, hi, this is Brad. I'll start off with going back to that question on A4. Those window bucks appear to project beyond the property line. So I guess that was one of my first questions, is trying to understand a little bit about that detail, because it's going to read more strongly, I think, and maybe is where you were getting at, as the punch kind of reads as the bigger window move or element potentially.
Right.
Yeah, so go ahead on that.
Oh, thanks, Brad, for your question. We do assume we will need a Tier 2 encroachment permit. We have not gone very far down that path. We are, as Brittany mentioned at the very start of the site development plan, So we're going to uncover exactly what's going to be required if in fact those they're basically light shelves and sunshades if they are to survive. We obviously need to determine what a permit is required for that.
Okay. I have a couple other questions. I'll just kind of roll right into those here really quick, if that's okay, Kelly.
Before.
I was looking at, I'm trying to find the elevation here, so pardon me for 1 second, but I was looking at the side elevation where you see the gray clear story element go up the building, and it looked like there were some windows within that. Is that what those are, the light blue, or is that glazing? And if so, how is that going to work being on the property line like that with the neighboring building that'll eventually be abutting it?
Thank you for that. We're going to obviously monitor what's happening with the project next door. As we've currently seen those plans for the proposed five-story development, the portion where those glass windows are located are on a portion of the site that has an opening on the adjacent property. They would need to be fire-rated glazing if they were to survive. They would provide natural light for the stairwell. And we're trying to bring in natural light since you're limited basically to the front and rear facade in other creative fashions. This is potentially one of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have one more question. Is on, if you look at A1, and that's the site plan. So it sounds like the bulkheads, the storefront bulkheads are 18 inches off the sidewalk, which is consistent with the neighboring properties. It looks like there's a bike rack right in front of one of the operable windows up at the north portion of the building, and I just wondered about that. It looks like that's going to be in conflict with the operability of those windows, unless I'm misunderstanding how that works.
Right. Those windows may open inward. We imagine them as a bifolding storefront opening. We are a bit challenged to get the two bike racks on site that are required. So as we head into SDP, that'll be one of the first things we really look at closely to see how we can successfully do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Are there any other questions for the applicant? See a lot of shaking no heads. So thanks so much for your time. That's all of our questions. Do we have any public comments, any raised hands? So just a reminder for anyone, if you're joining us by phone, you need to email landmark gov.org to let us know if you have a public comment. If you're joining us by computer, please use the hand raise function.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right, then.
I did email a letter before the last LPC meeting when this was originally scheduled in support of this project, just as a reminder as we are 2 weeks from that last meeting.
Thank you, Brittany. That's right. Yeah, got that right here. So we received a public comment letter from Lynn Brunning. I might be mispronouncing her last name, in support of the project. Okay, so if there are no public comments, then we'll go ahead and move into deliberation. And I might just pick on people. Brad, since your office is in the 5 Points Cultural District, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I was just actually looking down the street, trying to jog my memory on where some of the bike racks are, because it is tough. So it is a very tough condition at the sidewalk between that and light rail. So it's something I know that we've done a few buildings along the street here, and it's something we've struggled with. You know, I think that, you know, overall, I really kind of appreciate the approach, a very simple, straightforward design. I think that, you know, the areas that I'd like to hear some feedback from some of the other commissioners is really sort of the punched opening elements, and whether some of the patterns and the rhythms of the existing buildings are actually, you know, read within this facade. And it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a direct replication, but I think there's some nice patterning at these contributing buildings that it's kind of nice to start seeing how that can get translated to new buildings. And I think with, you know, I was trying to understand a little bit of that punch and how that punch reads in the light shelf, which could be a really fun and interesting design, but it's a little different than what is currently, you know, historically there. And I'm wondering how some of those other window proportions within that then start to read and feel, and what other people's thoughts are. So when I look at it, and I know not trying to get into the detail portion of this, but I see some really great opportunities for some modern detail elements, I think, that reflect the district well, and I'm not seeing that carried through just yet. So maybe that's something that will come, but I think overall the you know, the site is you know, a well-crafted site. I like actually the clear story elements and how it wraps up, and the side of the buildings, which will be very exposed. I like the articulation on those, and it's really kind of the next layer of how that front facade gets developed, I think, is important. And the only other comment I'd make before maybe some others jump in is the back, you know, it's on the back side. I know oftentimes we kind of punt a little bit on the backside, but I think that the simplicity of the elevation on Welton Street, and then how you see the back elevation, there's something that feels to me a bit like a disconnect there. So I think that having that relationship between front and back in this case might actually be important, because it really simplifies that rear elevation. And I think that was one of the comments, you know, we don't have a full elevation, so maybe a better understanding of that elevation would help, but that would be another comment. I think that there should be a stronger relationship between the elements of the rear and the front elevation.
Thanks, Brad.
Hmm?
And did you want to jump in, since I think you were commenting about the windows as well?
Thank you. Yes, this is Anne. I guess that my assumption is that the reason that punched openings are requested is because most of the buildings are bearing wall buildings. And I think, while I think the design of this building is terrific, I have to say the front looks like a curtain wall to me. And that's why I was asking about what a punched opening is. I think that the back elevation, which is being shown now, definitely looks like a curtain wall more than a brick bearing building. And I'm not saying that it should be a bearing wall building, but that was my initial reaction when I looked at it, is that there needs to be more brick. I think the paired window idea is sort of interesting, but I'm not sure that it's appropriate here, and that actually having brick, not spandrels, but brick jams in between, separating out the windows, might be a better solution. But I think the quality of the design work is terrific, and I have real confidence that the applicant can solve whatever requests that we have, because I think there's some really very innovative thinking about this. I just think that it looks too much like a curtain wall on the front and back elevation.
Thanks, Anne. Julie, I saw you kind of nodding your head. Are you in agreement?
Yeah, I actually do agree. And I would like to see trying to work in a little more brick, because the contributing buildings that are nearby both have more brick. I really like, I agree with Anne. I think it's really interesting. I like some of the architecture for sure. Some of the brickwork I think is really brilliant. And that's one of the other reasons I'd like to see a little bit more of it. That's my 2 cents.
Well, and let's keep in mind that this is the phase 1 submittal. So all of the materiality can be resolved for the design details. But I think that is a good comment to make, so that the applicant has it, you know, and can prepare for the next round.
I think if I can jump in too, Kelly,
Yeah,
on the window,
please.
I do agree with Brad's comment on the front and the back, maybe having just a little bit different character, and so how that is resolved, I think, in the mass and form is definitely something to consider. Kind of a very regular front facade, and then a kind of a more articulated and artful rear facade there, a little opposite of what we might see. But I think on the window comment too, the alignments and the elevations that were provided show in comparison with other landmark buildings in the district or protected buildings contributing. Heights and overall, head and sill heights seem to align, but that is kind of the end of the window compatibility. So whether that is, a solid brick division there, or it just seems like the margins are stretched, and that gives that much more modern open look that Anne was alluding to. So I agree as well. I think a study of the windows and matching in several ways, not necessarily just one proportion, would be beneficial here.
Thanks, Graham. Are there any other comments on this project, or is everyone in agreement with what's been said? I see Gary nodding his head. Aaron, do you agree? Great. Okay, Brittany, yes.
I just want to clarify that this building does back up to a commercial structure across the alley. It's one of the Denver Health clinics. And so the rear facade is recessed with kind of this white curtain wall detail in front to create some balcony space for the private residences. Just a point of clarity there.
Okay. And I think we can get more information in design details on that rear, the materiality of the rear, right?
Yeah, I think the question is going to be for you all, is this a conditional approval of mass form and context, or are the conditions that you have things that aren't conditions and it should be a denial? So it sounds a little mixed to me.
And before we have that conversation, Adam, was there something you wanted to chime in on?
Yes, Adam Hernandez, Assistant City Attorney. The staff report right now is recommending approval with conditions, and the conditions being submittal of 2 additional elevations. So I think the commission maybe needs to deliberate further or get clarification from staff. Does that mean those elevations are they necessary in order to approve this mass form and scale? And if they are, then I'm not sure that an approval would be the appropriate motion at this point. Because in essence, you're saying we're approving with the condition that we need to see something else to approve. So it's almost like a 2-step approval. So again, you may just want to further clarify that. And if the necessity for these elevations are so that a proper mass form scale can be approved, then maybe a continuance would be the appropriate motion in this point.
Adam, so one question I have on that is, typically, I would agree with you on that, but since this one is coming back for a part 2 submittal anyway, wouldn't we still be able to comment on the submitted elevation during that round? Does that make sense? And Brittany, if you want to chime in too.
It does make sense, but again, what you're approving now is the mass form and scale. And so
Okay.
you'd be making a further approval of design. And so, yeah, it can come back, but if you were to go with the staff report now, it is an approval of one thing, and then something else would be reviewed at that second stage. So that's just
Okay.
where I think further discussion needs to come.
Okay. Brittany, what were you going to say?
So I feel like I can pretty much tell what the rear elevation looks like. You can
Sure.
see the majority of it here in this elevation. It's just that 1-story garage structure is blocking a portion of the ground floor, which is probably more window openings, which we look at in the phase 2 submittal. And then I don't have a rear elevation of the garage structure, but if you go to the site plan, It's probably just going to be a wall, which faces interior to the patio with some planters on it. So I don't think it's like significantly changing the mass and scale. And again, if you look at this, like it looks like there's going to be one door on the ground floor level that's behind that garage. And then that's to access that patio space. So I don't feel like it's a significant change to the mass and scale of the project. Staff was comfortable with the proposed design for the rear elevation because it does back up to a commercial multi-story building that's not a residential use. So a lot of the buildings within the district back up to residential buildings, but this is one of the few buildings within the district that also backs up to a commercial building. So while it's a little bit different, we felt comfortable with it.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Brittany. And all of that seems to make sense to me. I kind of agreed with the conditions that you had outlined, Brittany, that you can see most of the rear elevation and then the plans kind of tell you what that garage wall is going to look like. So I would agree that I don't think that that's going to change the mass form and context. Do the rest of the commissioners agree with that? That the conditions written in the staff report would be appropriate and not impact the mass form and context? Okay. And you don't agree with that?
I don't agree because listening to what Adam says is I actually think the front elevation needs some significant restudying. And so I understand what he says is that if you can't restudy something that's actually going to change, you have to ask for the change. And so I don't agree. And even though Brittany understands what the back elevation is, it's not clear to me that the back elevation is the appropriate elevation, as we've said before, because it doesn't really match the front. So in a way, I think either a continuance or a denial is probably a more clear way. And then we hope that when that happens, the actual appropriate drawings will be submitted.
Sure. And you're getting to the next part I was going to. I was just talking about the rear elevation at this point, but and needing to see an elevation. So I was going to ask next, does everyone feel like we can make conditions for the window opening modifications at the front and the rear facade, or do we need to do a continuance or a denial? So Anne's weighed in that she thinks maybe a continuance or a denial. Gary, what are your thoughts?
Well, in addition to what Anne is saying about the front, I have a feeling that in some ways this submittal is maybe a bit premature relative to the other steps in the approval process, not just Preservation Commission, but the site development plan, because the access to the second floor, which is office space, as I understand it, needs to be accessible to the public. And that public access for disabled is through the rear. And there's no way that someone, I mean, I don't know how the public would know to access that from the rear, the way this whole building is configured. So I'm suspecting that there are other hurdles that this development will have to jump over to get approval from city planning and so forth. And that could change the character of what's being presented to us right now. So I've just got concerns that if we approve this, whether with conditions or otherwise, that the actual buildability of this concept is not certain.
I understand what you're saying, Gary, that there may be some constructability and feasibility issues, but I do think that they would return back to us if there were substantial changes that couldn't be administratively approved. Brittany, what were you going to say?
So this project is out of concept pending commission approval. So theoretically, this is a buildable project per the city. So that's usually how we like infill to go through the process. We like it to be out of concept before we bring it to the commission for review, because we don't like projects to be theoretically not buildable projects. So theoretically, this is a buildable project by the city.
Thanks, Brittany. So if we're, back to Anne's point of, maybe a continuance or a denial in order to, would be more appropriate in order to see the revisions that were being recommended to the front facade and the rear facade. I would say that I don't think a continuance would be appropriate because it's not that we need more information on what they've provided today. If we're looking for revisions, then I think if they're specific, we could make conditions. And if we don't have specific conditions, then a denial would be the route to move forward. So let's kind of revisit the comments about those two facades and determine whether those can be made conditions or whether it just needs to, if it's just so vague that it's restudy, then maybe that's not appropriate to do a conditional approval, as Anna suggested. So I think what I was hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, was that it's the proportions of the windows that seem a little off because they feel more like curtain wall. They're just such large sections, kind of having a spandrel or some sort of, wrapped kind of paired windows, right? So what seems more appropriate is to get those proportions to feel more like separate punched openings, consistent with the district. Is that accurate, everybody? Okay. And that's on the front facade, to clarify, along Welton. I think that's a pretty clear condition, but I'm open to suggestions. The rear facade, I'm not sure if we can make a clear recommendation on. Does someone want to weigh in on what the comments were there? Because I heard some people say, it just seems very very different from the front, and maybe it needs to have more of a connection to that front facade, that it's much more contemporary. Gary, you're shaking your head no. Do you disagree?
I guess I'm saying that because it is a rear facade, I'm not as concerned with it, that other than future submittals show the whole elevation, I'm not disturbed by the fact that the rear facade character is different than the front facade because it is at the rear. And as future buildings get built on this block, it's going to be less and less visible in terms of context.
I actually agree with you, Gary. I didn't have a problem with the rear facade. I mean, I had some questions about materiality, but that's a phase 2 issue anyway, so I wasn't worried about the mass.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that they're different, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because it distinguishes from the contributing buildings. I kind of liked it the way it was.
Okay. And
Kelly,
Aaron,
Yeah, I was saying that I actually like the difference as well and wasn't concerned about it. And I think it looks like a rather interesting elevation as it's presented so far.
so sorry, Graham.
I was just going to say, I think part of what we're seeing, from a true elevation perspective that reads a little different in the isometrics is this kind of highlighted white frame element. And like you said, Kelly, on the material side and the design details, how that evolves, I think will do a lot material wise to how the brick and other elements of the building kind of read through. It pops right now with that contrast in the renderings, but based on other commissioners' feedback, I'd be willing to see that as more of a design material type of review thing.
Okay, if that's the case, it sounds like we have a consensus who feels the rear facade as presented currently. I'm sorry, I've got a crying baby in the background. That's embarrassing. But if we have a majority that feels the current design proposal for mass forming context at the rear is acceptable, then what I'm hearing is we may be able to do a conditional approval on this. Sorry, I seem to have lost my presentation here.
Well, we can see you, and I think you're correct that I think at this point, someone just should try to make a motion, maybe.
So I can, this is Brad, I can try to make a motion, but could we, maybe let's circle back up and make sure we're all on the same page. So the rear, we're in agreement with staff's recommendations of getting the elevation for that, but nobody has any other concerns. Sounds like our only concern is really related to the front facade and studying the window ratios. Is that correct? And are we saying that we're approving this with condition of provide rear elevation, provide interior elevation at garage, and restudy the window ratios on the front facade?
Thanks, Brad, for picking that up. That's what I was hearing.
Yeah, I think we need to be a little more clear on what the desired result of restudying the front facade is. That, and I think to be explicit, I think we're looking for the window proportions to be more characteristic of the window proportions of the contributing buildings in the district.
That sounds good, and I see some nodding heads.
All right, I think I wrote down, I think what we're all thinking here. So I will go and try to make a motion here.
Thanks, Brad.
I move to conditionally approve application 2021-COA-086 for the Phase 1 mass form and context submittal for the infill project at 2818 Welton Street per design standards and guidelines, character defining features for the 5 Point Historic Cultural District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the following conditions. Provide a rear elevation of the primary structure without the garage blocking the facade for the design detail submittal. Provide an interior elevation of the garage structure for the design detail submittal. And restudy the front facade to develop a window proportions more characteristic of the district's contributing buildings.
Thanks, Brad. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second it. This is Julie.
Thank you, Julie. All right, then I will call for the vote. Brad,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Anne,
Aye.
Kelly, aye. All right, so we have a unanimous vote and the project passes with a conditional approval. And we'll see you back for the Phase 2 design details submittal. The next project on our agenda today is 2021-COA-077 at 433 Gilpin Street.
All right, so this is 433 Gilpin Street. It was constructed in 1923 and is a contributing building to the Driving Park Historic District. The 400 block of Gilpin Street features several of these modest one-story mission revival structures, as well as several more one-story bungalows on the other side of the street on the 400 block. These one-story mission revival structures are found throughout the Driving Park Historic District, and staff just wanted to point that out. On the right-hand side, you can see two of the adjacent buildings that are on either side of the 433 Gilpin Street. Okay. The applicant is requesting to demolish 37.62% of the walls and 39.74% of the roof, with a combined demolition of 38.42% of the walls and roof on the historic home. The applicant is proposing to demolish a significant portion of the historic roof and walls, which will negatively impact the appearance of the existing house, failing to meet intent statements 3A, 3B, 3C, 3E, and guideline 3.5. So pictured here is the existing and proposed site plans. The applicant is proposing to construct a rooftop addition and rear and side two-story addition. The proposed addition measures roughly 34 feet 5 inches by 33 feet 3 1/4 inch and is 26 feet 6 15/32 inch tall. The existing house is approximately 33 feet by 34 feet 1 inch in footprint size and is 19 feet 2 inches in height. So pictured here is a proposed basement level plans. Existing floor plans can be found in your packet. So I didn't include them on this slide, but they're in your packet. And then here's the proposed main level floor plan. And then finally, here's the proposed second floor level. Staff would like to note that the wall jog shown in the roof plan, which will be the next slide, is not shown in the second floor plan. This may be an earlier version of this floor plan, and the applicant will need to correct the drawing to accurately show the proposed second floor level. Okay. And then pictured here is a proposed roof plan. So the rooftop portion of the two-story addition will be set back approximately 17 feet from the front wall of the house and will be inset 2 feet 7 inches behind the main ridge of the roof. So the setback does meet the minimum 15-foot setback from the front wall of the house in our guidelines. The rooftop addition will be inset approximately 2 feet 5 inches on the north side of the house, meeting the minimum 2-foot inset from the side wall of the house in our guidelines. The rooftop addition will extend, excuse me, off the back of the house into a 2-story addition. On the south side of the house, the addition wall will jog forward approximately 2 feet and will extend into a 2-story side addition with a 1-story shed roof bump out. This does fail to meet the 2-foot inset requirement on the side wall of the house as outlined by our guidelines. Staff would like to point out that the wall, that from the side wall of the house, staff would like to point out the wall jog. You can see it more clearly in this roof plan. So it is set back behind the main roof ridge, and then it steps forward on that side 2-story portion of the addition. So staff would like to point out, the jog was added as a measure to prevent them from exceeding the 40% demolition threshold, which would require a public hearing. Staff do have some concerns about drainage on this addition because they are setting it behind that main roof ridge on the downslope. Staff do not recommend removing the rooftop addition forward to the main roof ridge, as it will increase the visibility of the addition and will also increase the amount of demolition, which would trigger the public hearing process. A rear addition with a connector or a small 1-story side addition may be more appropriate as outlined by our guidelines. So the rooftop and rear and side 2-story addition will feature a hipped roof clad in tile to match the existing roof. They did not provide materials for this, so it's not clear what that tile will actually look like and how closely it'll match the existing roof tile. The walls will be clad in a 3-coat stucco system. The proposed windows will have divided lights, in quotes, similar to the existing. This was outlined in their application, but no details were provided. The proposed door materials are not listed. So the applicant will need to submit specifications for the proposed windows and doors and ensure that the windows are inset into the walls a minimum of 2 inches. Divided light windows and doors must be simulated divided lights with a spacer bar. Additionally, the applicant is proposing 3 windows on the basement level on the south elevation. Staff will need section drawings showing the windows in the wall and specifications for those proposed windows. Here you can also see the proposed jog in the wall at the front of the house. It adds an additional level of complexity to the addition, and the size and massing gives the addition of additional visual prominence over the main structure. The proposed doors and windows on the east side of the addition are not compatible with the windows and doors on the rest of the historic house. Additionally, a hip roof form is not compatible with the existing side gable roof form on the historic house, which is contradictory to our guidelines. Pictured here is the existing and proposed south side of the house. Here you see the roof top addition extending forward approximately 2 feet to align roughly with the main roof ridge of the house. The rooftop addition extends 7 feet off the side of the house into a 2-story side addition with a 1-story shed roof bump out. The proposed window on the south side of the additions are not compatible with the windows and doors on the rest of the house, featuring varying window types that add complexity to the overall appearance of the addition. So here's the existing and proposed west elevation for the house. The addition will extend off the back of the house and will feature varying types of windows and doors that are not compatible with the existing windows and doors on the historic house, adding complexity to the overall design. This is on the back of the house and it may not be as readily visible, so some flexibility could be provided here. However, staff felt that this was such a jarring departure from the rest of the windows on the historic house that that it warranted noting. So pictured here is the existing and proposed north elevation. As you can see, the proposed addition is inset from the side wall of the house. This side of the addition has 2 windows at the 2nd floor level that do not fit the appearance of the other windows on the historic house. Additionally, there is no clear window rhythm that fits with the main house. The large amount of solid space on this side of the addition is not compatible with the window rhythms on the historic house and give it a more blocky, substantial appearance rather than allowing the addition to recede out. Here are some 3-dimensional drawings showing the proposed addition. The applicant is proposing a 6-foot wood rear yard fence, which can be clearly seen in the renderings and on the site plan. The applicant will need to provide details on the appearance of the proposed fence. Additionally, the applicant will need to set the fence back 12 inches from the front wall of the house per our guidelines. And then finally, the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing flat roof garage and is proposing to construct a new flat roof garage. The proposed garage will be 21 feet by 27 feet and will be 12 feet 5 inches in height. The garage will be clad in stucco. Staff does not have information on the proposed doors and windows for the garage, and we'll need that information before we can move the project further. Staff feels that the proposed addition is not, so in closing on this project, staff does not feel that the proposed addition is compatible with the modest scale and massing of the historic house, overpowering the historic character of the house. That's guideline 3.2. The addition is recognizable as modern construction. However, the proposed addition is out of scale with the historic house and does not relate to it. That's intent statements 3D and guidelines 3.3 and 3.9. The proposed addition is taller than the existing structure and features a mass and scale that is not subordinate to the main house. That's intent statement 3F and guideline 3.1 and 3.8. The window and doors do not feature rhythms, patterns, and proportions that like those on the historic home, failing to meet guideline 3.6. The proposed hip roof form does not fit the side gable roof form on the historic house, and the addition is substantially taller than the main house, adding visual prominence to the rooftop addition, guideline 3.7. The rooftop addition does not fully meet the setback requirements for rooftop additions, guideline 3.10. The proposed fence is not set back 12 inches from the front facade, guideline 5.9. Finally, the application as submitted is missing important information that will be needed to move the application forward. For these reasons, staff is recommending denial of the proposed application, citing intent statement 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, 3E, 3F, and design guidelines 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, and 5.9. Okay, and then one more final slide for you all. So the applicant did include several other buildings, streetscape studies and other buildings in the district that supposedly have additions. Staff did look up all of these addresses. Many of the additions that are recognizable were done in the early 2000s. I can give you those dates if you so require them. And it was before our current guidelines. They were reviewed prior to our current guidelines. And then some of them, there weren't additions at all. There's no record of landmark approval. And if any addition was made, it was constructed prior to this district designation, which was in 2003.
Thank you, Jesse. And I know you just addressed one of the questions I had for you, so thanks for that. Are there any questions for staff? No. I think that was my only question, were about those other additions in the neighborhood. Okay, is the applicant present, and can we please promote them? Looks like that may have already happened. So just a reminder, you have up to 10 minutes, and please start with your name and address, anyone who just is speaking on the applicant's behalf during that 10-minute period. All right, start when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Chris Maxwell. I am the owner and future occupant of this property. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Great. I have with me today, I have Jonas DiCaprio, who is my architect and builder, and I also have my brother, Ben Maxwell, on the call, who is familiar with redevelopment of houses in the city of Denver. So I appreciate everything that Jessie has done. We've been working with her for several months on working through her comments on the design. Obviously, we're a little disappointed in the denial status, but Jonas will talk through a lot of the things that Jessie addressed. I just wanted to jump in and point out for myself, as a future owner of this property, you know, one of the things that was most important to me is we realized early on that the driving park was a neighborhood initiated addition to the historic district. So getting the neighborhood involved early was really important because those are going to be my neighbors. And I reached out to Michelle Steed, who's my representative on Gilpin, as well as Betsy Rubner from the Driving Park Historic Board. And we spent quite a bit of time working with them on design and comments and what the neighborhood was looking for. And then they reviewed the design. They also invited us to present at the January board meeting, which we did, and it went really well. And so included in our package, you'll see a letter of support from the Driving Park Historic District itself. And then as part of Jessie's process, she also reached out to the Capitol Hill RNO area. And again, they provided us with another letter that we were very happy about of support for the design. I feel like we've tried to be really thoughtful with retaining the features of the old house, but updating it to the modern needs of this neighborhood. So anyway, that's my little soapbox. I'm going to turn it over to Jonas, and then if Ben has any comments at the end.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonas DiCaprio. I'm the designer and builder. My current address, 4505 East Montana Place. That's Denver 80222. First off, thanks to everybody for making the special meeting date for us. I've taken several projects through historic review, and sitting in on those 5-hour meeting or the last one, I understand how much time it takes from you guys. As Jesse mentioned, this house was built in 1923 and it's only about 1,000 square feet total. The home has not had any pre-renovations, and it's one of the smallest homes on one of the larger lots in the neighborhood. The home's been a rental for several decades, and it shows the hallmarks of being a long-term rental. It's got, you know, roof rot from just lack of maintenance on the gutters. We've got issues with fascia, soffit, rafters, etc. The ground around the house is also settled, and I think it's just a matter of, you know, having the negative grade and the lack of maintenance on the gutters. We've got some pretty severe structural issues to deal with on the exterior walls and foundation. So I think, you know, in my early conversations with Christina about the house, you know, if it wasn't in a historic district, I think we would have been having very different discussions about, you know, how much we're going to be investing in restoring versus, you know, if we just scraped and started over. But as she mentioned, she's, you know, in love with the home, and our planned approach is much more a combination of restoration, renovation, and addition. When working on the design, I think our challenge, which is really similar to a lot of these homes in the neighborhood, is that most of these homes were all sited along the north property lines, which makes a lot of sense. They're, you know, getting southern exposure to the yards and windows along the south side. So our home sits less than 3 feet from the north property line, and what may not be so easy to see in that first image that Jesse showed, our house also sits a full 3 feet deeper into the lot than the adjacent home. So when we were working, you know, to consider all the landmarks design guidelines, we also had to really look closely at Denver zoning restrictions and protecting our neighbors' solar access and privacy. We made a huge effort to push this addition as far back as we could to the property line while still complying with Denver zoning. The addition is 48 feet from the sidewalk, and it's over 60 feet from the street. So those views, while in those 3D models, they can seem like that addition is really sitting quite prominent. It's very obscured by both the property to the north and the property to the south. We managed to, by pushing it all the way back, we managed to keep the original historic proportion of the house, including all the character defining features prominent, like the front chimney, that front facing gable, which is on the northeast corner, the front porch, and the front entry door, which has a little portico cover over the top of it. And then with our design of the addition, we also dropped the addition's main floor level down to grade, where if you look at the original house, it's actually 3 feet above grade. This just helped us get that overall height of the addition down further and minimize the impact on the street. The location of the addition also keeps the open space to the south and the west sides of the lot, which, you know, when we push an addition entirely into the rear with a similar size, that just we couldn't make that happen. To address a couple of points that Jesse brought up quickly, the original home is a side gable, but early on in that process, we looked at what a similar style roof would look like on an upper floor per staff's urgings. And what we noticed really quickly is that a 2-story side gable addition, when you saw both the north and south ends of that, it looked and felt like a 3-story addition, and it just overwhelmed the original home. So we instead proposed a low-pitched hip roof, which is found throughout that neighborhood and is also very common on those mission-style revival homes, especially on a second floor, because we just felt it was the least intrusive, it met the zoning requirements, and it preserved our neighbor's sun access. And our neighbor to the north has a sunroom on that side, so we felt like it was particularly important to her because that's where she maintains and keeps all her plants throughout the winter. So demolition on the home, I understand we are close to those percentages on that 40%, but we did keep it limited to the west corner of the south side and the rear, which we felt was the most minimal visually from the street, and it also contained the fewest, if any, defining features. The entire street facade and the north facade remain original. In regards to the window sizing and placement, we're obviously willing to work on, you know, proportions and getting that just dialed in right. With those patio doors that face the street, we they're nearly identical. Our neighbor both to the north and the south have very similar style French doors that lead out to the front. And we use that transom piece to more or less create our transition so we could match the header heights from the original windows to where our new addition was and be able to tie that together. We hear staff's desire for the minimal one-story addition, and I think we just needed to kind of urge to the commission that we felt strongly that it really limited Christina's ability to have a home that's in size and value comparable to the neighborhood. The average home size on Gilpin Street is about 3,000 square feet. Like I said, we're 1,000 square feet. The average lot size is about 4,700 and we're 6,000. So again, we're smallest house on one of the biggest or larger lots on that block. The rear addition entirely outside of that original footprint also eliminates significant outdoor space. So we felt like the more we pushed to a one-story really large addition in the back, we were going to also create violations with Denver zoning code, which were avoidable. So as what we propose today, our design meets all the zoning requirements, and it can just proceed along a normal plan review and permitting process, which saves Christina months and significant expense. Jessie made a comment during her presentation about the second floor plan not showing the jog on the wall on the street facade side. That jog actually happens so high above where our floor level is that it actually just becomes a soffit on the second floor. It doesn't actually create a jog in the floor plan walls there. So we do understand, we push that front facade back in order to stay under our thresholds on demolition, but we understand the conditions that it's going to create as far as the constructability and water and so on. So we have thoughts on how to address that. I'm going to turn it over to the commission and just wanted again to thank everybody for making this happen.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate you guys attending today. Sorry, the last meeting was so long. All right, do commissioners have any questions for the applicants? I had one question, and that was relating to the outdoor shower on the second floor. So I believe what I was seeing in the plans is it's only outdoor from the roof, that there's still an exterior wall. And I see
100% correct.
Okay. Now, how does this retractable roof work, and what's the material of that?
It's a metal. It's actually like it's a louver system. So you can, operate those louvers. You can just basically open them as much or as little as possible. And with the color of the roof, we were essentially going to try to integrate that in so that, color variation would be minimal, if anything, from seen from that west side, which again, that's the alley side. You'd have to go, I don't know, the next block over into somebody's yard in order to actually, I think, see that roof.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's kind of like louvers, when they're shut, they're kind of like this, and then you just kind of angle them open.
Yep. Like you see on patio covers.
Okay. And then the elevations say that the wall materials are compatible with the existing, and I know Jessie's staff report said that they'd be stucco. So I assume that that's what you meant by compatible, is matching.
Correct. So it has a stucco coat system that's over the existing brick now, but as I mentioned, we've got a lot of settling and water issues there. So there's going to have to be repairs. So our thought was, once we do our 3-coat system on the new addition, we would come back over and have to repair and skim. So we would get all that texture consistent.
Gotcha. Okay. Those were my only questions. Anything else from the commissioners? No. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Okay, do we have any public comments on this project? And a reminder, so we don't have anyone on the line by phone, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so anyone who's joining us via their computer and Zoom, please use the hand raise function now if you have a question or a comment, sorry.
I don't see anyone hand raised.
Okay. All right, then let's move into, Jessie, you got some recap? Okay.
Yeah, so I did want to follow up. I did fail to point out that there are R&O comments, and they're included in your packets for your review. I also wanted to touch base. This lot is, and as well as the adjacent lot, is very adjacent lots are very flat. So there will be quite a bit of visibility of this addition. I would also like to point out that while the lot size is larger and zoning may allow more flexibility, Landmark can be more restrictive through their guidelines, and it's more about making this compatible with the existing historic context of the main house as well as the surrounding houses. And as I showed on that first slide, a good number of the houses on this block are those, and on this side of the street are those one-story Mission Revival structures. There are some 4 square houses across the street on the other side, but there's only about 4 or so of those. And then on the other end of the block going towards, I believe, the 300, or excuse me, the 500 block, those are one-story bungalow structures. So most of the houses on this block are 1 story, story and a half, and then there's only a few 4 squares that are 2 story in height.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. All right, let's move into deliberation. What did everybody think? Who wants to kick it off?
Kelly, I'll kick it off here. And actually the images up on the slide that as I was looking through this really, I think kind of resonated with me on staff's review of the intent statements and our guideline statements about oh my gosh, and now the word is escaping me, but being not overwhelming to the historic house. We talk about this all the time. Now I have to scroll through and find the word I'm looking for. Subordinate. Thank you. That's the word. Goodness. But you know, in the lower left-hand corner of the screen where we can see that original cross gable that is intersected fairly abruptly, and then the addition behind with real sharp planes and a much higher, taller mass. You know, in spite of other efforts made to help retain some of the historic character of the front of the home, that was abrupt to me, and I think, you know, of the many different points, I just really feel like this is not subordinate in its current configuration, but that one corner seemed to be the most prominent non-subordinate component that I kept coming back to in working through the drawings. So that was my initial reaction, at least.
Thanks, Graham. Other thoughts?
Oh, this is Julie. I agree with Graham, absolutely. But I was also wondering what the commissioners thought about the hipped roof. Talking to the applicant, I now understand why they went that direction, but I was concerned about it not being respectful of the original structure. But I'm wondering what the other commissioners think about that.
Yeah, Gary.
I agree, and to start with the hip roof. The hip roof proposal is to reduce the visual appearance of an addition that is too large for the existing house. So it's not only incompatible with the architectural character of the original building, it's also a kind of a device that was used to camouflage a addition that is too large for the house. And I think that's really where my concern is that the proposal is trying to do too much to an existing building to achieve something that probably isn't very compatible with the character of the original building in the first place. So I mean, I agree with staff's concerns and their proposed decision to deny based on the basis that the addition is not compatible in character and not subordinate to size of both the building and the neighborhood context.
Any other thoughts on the roof form? Is everyone in agreement with staff?
Yep.
I was a little on the fence about that myself because I do think it is found in the neighborhood. Clearly, it's not the same form as what the existing home is. I think you know, maybe I'd feel different if, so from the north side of the house, you can still see the original roof line, but on the south side, that roof is completely gone. And so I think it becomes much more prominent, and then it kind of looks like a shed roof onto this, like, you know, two-story hip roof form, which is where I think that really detracts. I think maybe had there been less of the existing building demolished and you could still see that roof line on the south, I don't know, maybe a hipped roof wouldn't bother me as much. Because I do appreciate the applicants really trying to minimize the height and the visibility from the street. And I think that the view from the street straight onto the house does successfully help minimize that height. But I think when you're looking at it from either side, it's especially the south side that I find troublesome, where you can no longer see that side gable form of the original home, and really that hip roof is the predominant now. That was my only issue with the hip. I guess I'm wondering if we need to break it down further into some other comments, or are we, whoop, Jesse, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just forgot to, in my staff feedback, I did make a note here that in the past, whenever I was reviewing this project, I had discussed with the applicant about how we could reduce the visibility. And one recommendation was potentially a flat roof with a parapet would help to reduce the overall height and visibility of it. It wouldn't be necessarily compatible with the existing gable roof, but if, as Gary was saying, the point was to reduce the visibility of it, that may be an option. I would also like to note too, the applicant did talk about, you know, there being conflicts with zoning if they met some of Landmark's restrictions. I did let them know that we do have an administrative review process that would allow for them to do a connector piece and potentially a rear two-story addition if it pierced the bulk plane, and as long as it made it more compatible with the surrounding historic context. So that option is also on the table. We can also write letters of recommendation if you feel strongly about certain design elements that would better help this addition fit within the district.
Thanks, Jesse.
You know, looking at this one, it reminded me a lot of a application we saw not too far ago. It was also Driving Park. It was a small, similar, simple, I think it was Mediterranean Revival even type of building. And because of the slope of the lot, it had an integral garage. It was kind of a unique feature, but it was another small home with a large addition that after an initial conversation like this and some revisions, actually that addition did lose some footage, but was not dramatically smaller and did a lot to respond, I think, to the original design details, while also all these different ways between roof and setbacks and some of that concealment that Jesse mentioned. It became a much more subordinate and historically sympathetic addition, I think, and that was it's striking in some of its similarity here. It felt familiar, so I think there's a lot of really great room to tweak this and adjust it, and we've seen it happen recently with a very similar home in a very similar part of the city in the same neighborhood there. So, and Jesse, you maybe.
Yeah. Do you remember who the staff person that presented that project?
It was Abby's project. Yep.
It came back once with a revision, and I think once with just a minor follow-up on a zoning piece, if I recall. But
yeah, exactly. It had a really deep slope in the backyard, so they were able to sink it a little bit more, I think. So a little different in that regard, but yeah, it's a good one that I'll send we'll cue Jesse into that one.
Sounds good. It was familiar, but I think it faced a lot of the initial challenges that this one does with respect to the initial size and, you know, and wanting to get some space where historically not all that space existed. So.
Good idea, Graham. There are a lot of similarities there. I think one of the challenges I also saw with this is it's just doesn't seem very reversible at all. You know, there's a lot of demolition along, you know, two walls that kind of intersect, being the west and the south walls. And so I think that we've seen some other additions that maybe propose to connect a little bit more through existing openings. And I'd encourage looking at that. I understand that they're underneath the demolition threshold, which is good. But I still think that there could be some progress looking into that. Are there any other comments on this one? It sounds like, yeah, Anne.
Hi, this is Anne, and I would just maybe as a friendly comment, say to the applicant that they might start by looking at guideline 3.3, which has to do with the setback, the 4-inch setback, because I think that's going to be non-negotiable. And I think that's one of the reasons what we're looking at right now looks so heavy and cuts off the roof. And I think that might be a great place to start when you start to rethink how the project is going to work.
Good idea, Anne. And I do want to really applaud the applicant for going and speaking with the neighbors and the RNO. I think that all that's great. And I know it can be a real challenge to meet both the RNO's requirements and the landmark requirements and zoning and yada, yada, yada. But I do really applaud the applicant for taking those steps. And I think that it's definitely doable to put an addition on this. I just agree with staff that I don't think the guidelines are being met yet with this design. Gary, did you have something to add?
Well, only really that, you know, if you ignore the basement and garage, this is an attempt to triple the size of an existing house. And that's a very, very challenging prospect when the other requirements are to preserve the original character and be somewhat subordinate. So I think that, you know, a successful solution is going to be a smaller addition and one that is not only more subordinate, but preserves more of the original character of the contributing house.
Thanks, Gary. It sounds like most of the commissioners are in agreement with the staff report. Are there any further comments before we move to a motion? All right, who's going to make the motion?
I can make the motion, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Graham.
All right, Madam Chair, I move to deny application number 2021-COA-077. To scroll up and down here for the proposed addition, garage and fence at 433 Gilpin Street as per intent statements 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, 3E, 3F, design guidelines 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, 5.9, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thanks, Brad. All right, I will call for the vote. Brad.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Julie.
Aye.
Gary.
Aye.
Anne.
Aye.
Kelly. Aye. All right, so we have a unanimous vote. And good luck. You can continue working with Jesse to revise your submittal. The next project we have on today's agenda is 2021-COA-085. The address is 1203 East 3rd Avenue.
So our last project is in the Country Club Historic District. It was constructed in 1908 and is within the period of significance within the Country Club Historic District. The applicant is requesting retroactive approval for light fixtures that were installed on the primary structure. 1203 East 3rd Avenue is a Denver square that historically fronted onto Downing Street. The primary entrance of the structure remains on the east elevation that fronts onto Downing Street. However, it was readdressed to 3rd Avenue at some point. It's unclear to staff when it received that readdressing. But basically how you enter the property is from this walkway that you see in the photograph in the top image here, off of 3rd Avenue, walk up to the covered porch on the east elevation, and then go in through the front historic east elevation openings. There are no actual front doors or entries on 3rd Avenue. So this property does have a unique situation because of its readdressing and positioning. Previously, the commission reviewed updates to the rear elevation and the connector addition that the applicant was closing out permits on when the landmark inspector went out to the site and noticed the new LED light fixtures. So let's see if I can get the slides to change. So the LED light fixtures were installed in 2015 to replace existing floodlights located at the second floor string course, which you can see pictured here. So these were the previous floodlights that were installed on the home. And then the applicant installed new fixtures just under the roof eave in 2015 to replace those fixtures. In 2019, when the inspector went out to the site, as I previously said, he did note these fixtures were in violation of the landmark approval, as we hadn't reviewed or approved the previous fixtures or these new 2015 fixtures. So 3 fixtures were installed on the south elevation, which is the elevation that faces onto East 3rd Avenue. And then 2 fixtures on the primary structure on the alley elevation, and 1 fixture on the garage. So you can see those locations here just under the roof eave. This is the installed fixture as photographed. This fixture is able to do colored full spectrum lighting. However, the applicant states that most of the time it's kept in the white light mode, and only for special occasions such as holidays are the full spectrum colors used. The fixtures do come in black, but the applicant has painted them white to blend in with the white painted brick of the building. Additionally, on August 8th, 2020, so prior to the inspector going out to the site, we did receive a complaint to 311 from an adjacent property owner regarding these lights, and that complaint states panels of high intensity colored and white lights just under the roof line that illuminate the outside of the house were installed. These high intensity light panels are coupled with some type of computerized system to create light shows of flashing colored and white lights on the interior of the home. So we did receive a complaint via 311, and then when the inspector went out to the site in November to close out the building permits for the improvements to the connector rear addition, he also noted these light fixtures. So here are the light fixtures at night. These photographs here are showing the rear alley elevation and that connector garage addition. And then on the side here in figure 1, you can see the fixtures that are along 3rd Avenue. This is them in their white configuration. I don't have any photos of them in their colored configuration. I just have heard from the surrounding neighborhood, and based on the manufacturer specs and what the applicant states, that the colored configuration is only used during the holiday season. So Landmark staff are very concerned about these fixtures because the country club design guidelines for lighting indicate that focus lights on walkways and entries and avoid lighting on architectural elements or building walls. Staff, again, think that the light fixtures, while located on the entry side of the building, do not actually illuminate an entrance into the building because there is no entrance into the building along 3rd Avenue, and the walkway leading up to the entrance of the building is somewhat removed from where these fixtures are placed. Additionally, we're concerned that the fixtures are not in style with the character of the building. The general design guidelines for Denver landmark structures suggest using lighting to be compatible with the surrounding historic buildings and the surrounding historic context. It recommends using ambient street lighting. And if new fixtures are necessary, they should be in contemporary of design or simplified historic character compatible with the placement, design, and materials of adjacent historic lighting on buildings. The level of illumination should be limited to perform the necessary lighting tasks, and all lighting should be downlights. So as you can see in this image, they are downlights, but the fixtures are located under the roof eaves. This property is located on a corner. There's not a street light directly on this side of the street, so they don't have as much ambient light from the surrounding streetscape. The only street lighting is located across the street, but we just have some concerns that it's not meeting the design guidelines in terms of placement of the lighting and style fixture. Lighting is also intended to be used to enhance the historic building and the surrounding character. Our guidelines strongly discourage the use of any colored lighting, so we do have concerns that these light fixtures are able to do a full color spectrum when our guidelines encourage using soft white lighting whenever possible, located at entrances and things like that. Our guidelines also talk about direct flood lighting only onto important civic buildings and not illuminating adjacent buildings. This is a single family residence and is not a important civic institutional building. So we are concerned about the level of illumination on this building. So at this time, we are recommending denial of this application as we do not feel that it complies with the design guidelines for the Country Club Historic District or the general design guidelines for Denver landmark structures and districts.
Thanks, Brittany. Are there any questions for staff? Nope. All right. Could we please promote the applicant? And just as a reminder to the applicant, you have up to 10 minutes to present. Please start with your name and address for the record. And once we move into deliberation, we won't be able to come back to any further conversation with you. So make sure to, get everything in those 10 minutes.
Jen, just as a reminder, we have an applicant presentation for this application.
Thank you. So hold on a second. I'm going to switch things over.
Great.
Yeah, and Jen, can you actually, there's two Manleys in here. One is Trisha Manley, one is Chris Manley. Can you promote Trisha Manley and not me?
Oh, yep, absolutely. We'll fix that. Thank you.
Great. Start whenever you're ready. And you need to unmute yourself.
Hold on.
Oh.
I have to switch it first and then I have to do the timer. So that'll be a second. Hold on.
Never mind. Don't start.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Trisha Manley. I'm a resident at 1203 East 3rd Avenue. So we've owned this home for just over 17 years and have made numerous improvements during that time, always being mindful that we're in a historic district and working with the landmark staff on many occasions. We appreciate you giving us time to discuss this issue. Unfortunately, we feel staff's report is incorrect in many areas, and we believe that has led to the denial recommendation. Approximately 6 years ago, we had problems with the existing floodlights becoming rusty and unsafe, which is when we replace them with the current lights. Our understanding at the time was that while exterior lighting is included in landmark oversight, it was not standard practice, that this was an area being actively dealt with based on staffing and priorities at that time. Pat Cashin will comment further on this when I finish, and on the onerous nature of going back to retroactively address items such as this, which, you know, quite frankly, you could probably walk by any house in Country Club and find any number of things that have been done over the years that may or may not meet certain standards. But to address some of the points from the staff brief, C6, the comments incorrectly note that the home's entry is on Downing Street and not 3rd Avenue. We bought this home in 2004. The front entrance was as it is today and faces 3rd Avenue. Since at least the early 80s, this has been the case. The address was officially changed to the 3rd Avenue address more than 40 years ago, and we do not have an entrance on Downing Street. Functionally, our front door is on 3rd Avenue, and the lighting on both the south and east facades of our home indeed do illuminate walkways and entrances to our home. 5.21 comments note a street light. The street light is more than 75 feet across the street from our home and provides no illumination on our property. Comments also note that in Country Club, lights are not located under roof eaves. What Brittany has up on the screen now, we submitted several examples from within Country Club where homes do have lighting under the roof eaves. Note there are 2 examples from the 100 block of Lafayette, the 300 block of Gilpin, the 100 block of Race, the 300 block of Vine, and 2 on Westwood Drive with lighting under the roof, providing down lighting, in many cases significantly more lighting than ours provide. We do also have additional lighting at a lower level at the front door and garage entry. 5.23, we believe it is a bit of an overstatement that the fixtures are visible from the public right-of-way. You would have to be specifically looking for them for this to be the case, as they are white and blend in with the background. And from 3rd Avenue Parkway, these fixtures would be 75 feet away and 25 feet in the air. Staff expresses an opinion about the fixtures that are 25 feet in the air being incompatible with the architecture. As illustrated by the example sent to Brittany, none of our other neighbors have been subject to this same enforcement. Staff expressed concern about the lighting drawing attention to the building. However, the lights have been in place for 6 years without any comments from the neighbors up until a single anonymous complaint this past year. And our feeling is that that was somebody that just didn't like the flashing lights or the colored lights, which I'll get to in a second. And furthermore, our home lighting is substantially less than the examples in our neighborhood shared on the screen right now. The color option is used with very limited frequency, as Brittany noted, for holidays or, you know, such as Christmas or whatever. We would estimate that this is less than 10 nights per year. On those occasions, the color lights are set to go off on a timer, usually around 10 to 11 p.m. Outside of those occasions, the lighting's primary function is to illuminate our property. It is not designed to feature anything architecturally. Additionally, during the time when the complaint was filed, we had a power outage that had caused an electrical short with the control panel, which we obviously had fixed as quickly as possible. There's no ability to have a quote unquote light show or anything like timed or, you know, what they were saying, flashing. The only reason that those lights were changing was because of the power outage. So then, given the increase in criminal activity in Denver, especially recently, we believe it is reasonable to do all we can to protect ourselves and our property. An article in the Denver Post 2 weeks ago noted that according to Denver police data, Denver saw significant increases in property crime in 2020. Burglaries rose 23%, larceny 9%, auto theft 61%, and theft from cars 39%. Every time you open the Nextdoor neighborhood app, it's another story of a bike being stolen or a package stolen from someone's porch, garages being broken into. Denver is currently considered safer than only 6% of US cities, and we have a 1 in 26 chance of being a victim of a property crime, which is well higher than the national median. A well-lit property is certainly less likely to be targeted than one that is not. Within the lighted area, we have 5 doors to the home as well as an egress window to the basement. We believe that the lighting from the ground is providing security at the perimeter of the house. We have young children in our house, and we don't feel it's prudent to recommend reducing our security lighting and consequently putting our family and property at risk. 5.24, again, the use of the color feature is very limited. There are only 8 combinations of colors programmed into the control. So while technically there are more that are possible, it's not the way ours is set up. Again, the fixtures do cast light down that provides lighting for walkways and entries as well as to the egress window. The light does not point out away from the house to where it would illuminate anything far from the house at all, and definitely not anyone on the neighboring properties or the street. In the examples that we submitted, the lighting extends much further away from the base of the home than ours does. Ours points straight down at the base. It does not go out more than a couple of feet. Another example was provided, which was number 2 on the PDF, that shows a home on the 300 block of Humboldt that clearly is set for the purpose of illuminating architectural features, those large front columns on the home and the detailing above, which is much more deliberate than lighting we have just pointing down to provide security down the perimeter of our house. And then the last one was 5.25. Lighting provides illumination from the front gate to the front door and to the back deck area. Again, the intent is to provide a level of security and not trying to claim any sort of merit of architectural features. Although the staff report states otherwise, the lighting does coordinate with additional lighting at the gate, front door, garage door, kitchen door, and both alley and driveway garage doors. Again, thank you for your time and consideration, and we look forward to finding the acceptable resolution. And if Pat Cashin is on, I will turn it over to him.
Okay, I think the larger issue here is that this the landmark inspection was triggered by a permit for a deck and some other minor site features, and this lighting was discovered at the final landmark inspection. As Tricia has presented here, there's lots of lighting in Country Club and I'm sure in other historic districts that have been put up without approval. And I'm just trying to understand what's really fair here to not only maintain the landmark standards throughout the city, but to deal with basically non-conforming situations. And it has to do specifically with lighting, but there's lots of other features. Fences that are put up without approval that are non-conforming maybe to landmark and sometimes even to zoning. And it seems that some policy needs to be in place so that not only the homeowners, but the design professionals that work in historic districts are aware of these things. The lighting has come up on other issues. I also have another project in a different historic district where the landmark inspection was triggered by an addition. The things on the addition were resolved, but there was a fence that was installed without a permit, but it was also installed by the previous owner. So in that particular situation, the current owner is burdened by having to deal with something that she had nothing to do with it. So I think some equitable policy needs to be in place. There really is no handout per se about how the landmark inspections are done, how they apply to pre-existing conditions, how do they apply to work done by previous owners. It's all a little confusing to me, and I'm not sure how it gets resolved. So just please consider that in your deliberations.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicants? No questions? All right, well, thank you for your time. Yes, Brittany, if you have recap, can we wait until after the public comment period? Thanks. Are there any public comments? If so, please use the hand raise function at this time. I believe there's no one on the phone, right?
Right, correct. And I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right. So if there aren't any public comments, Brittany, recap.
So I just wanted to follow up on the inspections process. And Jen, while you're doing that, can you switch back to our PowerPoint presentation? Again, we received a complaint on this.
Before you switch back to the other PowerPoint, I was actually going to ask you, Brittany, if you had any information on those other homes. Do we want to keep that up on the screen?
Sure, we can keep that up. I can address that first, I guess. All of these homes are within the Landmark Historic District. I don't have specific addresses in this PowerPoint to research any of these homes are where they are. In terms of the inspection process and how it would tie in with this PowerPoint, we as landmark staff don't actively go out looking for violations. However, when a violation is reported to us via 311, we are required to follow up and inspect that violation. So this property was reported to us as a violation in August 2020 for these light fixtures. So again, our inspector also went out in November, and that violation was already on his radar to close out the permits for the alterations made to the connector rear addition of this property. So at that time, the inspector noted that the light fixtures did not also have a landmark review and approval on them or permit. So when the inspector goes out to close out any permit, any violation that is on the site is noted by the inspector, whether or not they were done by the previous owner or the current owner. It becomes the responsibility of the current owner. And so we get notified of violations via two ways, either closing out a current active open permit or a report of a violation from 311. So both of those things happened in this instance, and that is how we became aware of this violation. Could you go to our PowerPoint now, Jen? Is that possible? I do have some.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it's not just the landmark process for inspections. We follow the zoning inspection process, and so sometimes there are things that are fine per our design guidelines, but we're done without a zoning permit, and like fences, for example. And so we, per the zoning code and zoning inspection process, the zoning inspector has to cite the owner for it, even if it was done by the previous owner, if there's not a permit for that work, or if it doesn't meet the zoning code, or both, which is usually more often the case. And so as a result, we tack on to that with the landmark process as well.
So I just wanted to address the applicant stated that their entrance is on 3rd. So the south elevation is the East 3rd Avenue elevation. As I stated during my presentation, the walkway is accessed off of East 3rd Avenue, but I'm not aware of any door on the East 3rd Avenue elevation. This is that elevation here. I can't say exactly where the front door of this home is because the historic front porch is enclosed. There is a door on the alley elevation, but there is no door on the south elevation. As the applicant stated, there is an egress window, which you can see noted in this plan along the East 3rd Avenue elevation, and there are some doors on the rear alley elevation that the light fixtures on the alley elevation perhaps help illuminate.
And it looks like the applicant has his hand up, so.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that the applicant wants to make a comment on that because I believe the front door is that stair up to the enclosed porch, which is on the south.
Yeah, Kelly, I was just going to clarify that to the plan left there facing south, that is the front door, and it is indeed facing 3rd Avenue.
Thank you. Okay. All right, and Brittany, I know you already said that you don't have exact addresses of the examples that were in the applicant's presentation. So I assume that means we don't have information as to whether those were reviewed and approved by Landmark or not.
I do not, and if the applicant provides me those addresses, I'm happy to look into that. Okay. And if they would like to report them as violations, we're happy to take up that and cite those as well.
Okay. Thank you for clarification. Let's move into deliberation. All right. What was everyone's thoughts on this? Don't all speak at once. Okay.
Kelly, this is Brad. I can start in. So
Thanks.
I just, I understand everybody's frustration, but I think, just looking at the country club guidelines, fixture style should be in character with the structure style. And I think that guideline, is clearly not met with the look and feel of this fixture style. So I just would start there. So I guess as you start looking at it kind of in those terms, that's kind of the first thing that jumps out at me. We would probably not approve that type of a fixture if somebody did bring that to us to review as a starting point.
Thanks, Brad.
Madam Chair, this is Julie. Brad, I agree with Brad. I tried to look at it. Would we have approved these in the first place? And I don't believe that we would have.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, I'll just chime in. I agree. I know this is really frustrating when these violations happen and that can be a lot of confusion from applicants as to what requires review by Landmark, but lighting is in our guidelines. It is something we review. And I think Brittany's done a great job of highlighting the applicable guidelines, and it's pretty clear that these just don't meet it. I mean, I think they are downlights and they are identifiable as new. So I think they have that going for it. And I do understand and appreciate the applicant's concerns about security. I just think that there's probably other solutions that would meet the guidelines that could address security. Gary, did you have anything to add?
Well, I agree with what's been said. And one of the things that kind of struck me was the homeowner's comment that, and if I understood it correctly, that they assumed that the Landmark Preservation Commission's regulations about exterior lighting were not being enforced, which is, it just struck me as an unusual response to the non-compliance of this. I agree that the fixtures are inconsistent with the architectural style. They light the building in a way that is inconsistent with the character of the buildings. They do not comply with the standards. And I agree with the staff's recommendation for denial.
Thanks, Gary. I would just say to the applicant, I'm sure that there was obviously no malice in your decision to install the lights, and we understand that there were floodlights on the building before, and those likely weren't reviewed and approved by Landmark either. But yeah, I think it sounds like we're all in agreement that the existing lighting does not meet the guidelines. Are there any other comments? Okay, who's going to make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Anne.
Madam Chair, I move to deny application number 2021-COA-085 for the installed building lights at 1203 East 3rd Avenue per Country Club Design Guidelines C6 Design Guidelines 5.21, 5.23 to 5.25, character defining features for the Country Club Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Anne. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I second.
Ooh, I think it was a tie, but I heard Julie first.
Oh, it's Aaron. I didn't.
Oh, Aaron. Sorry. There's too many. I've got the Brady Bunch squares up. I can't tell who's speaking. Okay, Aaron, thank you for seconding. I will call for the vote. Brad.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Julie.
Aye.
Gary.
Aye.
Anne.
Aye.
Kelly. Aye. All right, we have a unanimous vote and the motion passes. So the proposed design is denied. All right, that was the last project on today's agenda. Jen, did you have any discussion or business
Nope.
items?
Nope, that's
All
it.
right, then I'll go ahead and close the meeting. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Bye, everybody.